Hello and welcome. This is The Explainer, where we dig into complex ideas by going straight to the source.
All right, let's jump right in. We tend to think of our big political debates, left versus right, as pretty modern things, maybe starting around the French Revolution or the Enlightenment. But what if that's wrong? What if the roots of these arguments go way, way deeper?
Well, the source for this explainer, a book by a 19th century rabbi named Eliyahu ben Amozig, makes a pretty bold claim. He says they're not really about politics at all. They're about an ancient theological conflict. He argues that this clash between Jewish and Christian moral systems is like a hidden blueprint for our biggest arguments today. It's a really fascinating and yet pretty provocative way to look at things.
Okay, so to really get this argument, we first have to understand how the source even sees the relationship between these two faiths. And let me tell you, it's probably not what you're thinking.
So the argument goes like this. Christianity isn't some totally separate tree. It's more like a branch that grew from the mystical roots of Judaism, specifically the Kabbalah. But it misinterpreted them. The idea is that it wasn't a brand new religion, but more of an internal movement inside Judaism that took very practical, this-world ideas and kind of turned them into this abstract metaphysical philosophy.
And that right there is the key difference. Jewish mysticism, in this view, is all about ideas to help you live your life and even perfect the world, right here, right now. The Christian interpretation, on the other hand, took those ideas and used them to create a framework for a metaphysical escape from this world, a world that it saw as broken and corrupt.
So you've got this basic split, right? Fix the world versus escape the world. And according to the source, this one difference creates two totally opposite moral blueprints for how we should live.
Let's start with the big one, the worldview. What is the fundamental point of our existence, according to each system? I mean, really, what are we all doing here?
And here's where you really see that split. The Jewish worldview is presented as being all about fixing the world. There's this concept called tikkun olam. It literally means repairing the world. So the physical world isn't some mistake we need to get away from. It's more like a project we're supposed to perfect. But the Christian worldview, as it's framed here, is about escaping the world. The physical world is seen as fallen and corrupt, so the real goal is salvation in the next one.
Okay, so if those are the big goals, what about us? How much control do we actually have in all this? And that brings us right to the idea of human agency, or, free will.
And again, the contrast is just stark. The Jewish perspective is framed as having this idea of radical free will, like you have almost unlimited freedom to change yourself, to change your very nature through your choices. But in the Christian framework being described, it's more about predestination. Your salvation is ultimately decided by divine grace, not so much by your own actions.
All right, and all of this leads to what the source calls the most critical difference of all. It's about the very nature of ethics, of morality itself. Is there just one set of rules that applies to absolutely everyone in every single situation? Or is it more complicated than that?
This is where the idea of two moralities versus one really comes into play. The book argues that Judaism has what it calls a dual morality, meaning there are different rules for different contexts. For individuals, it's all about kindness, but for the nation as a whole, there are other rules, like the laws of war, which are about survival. Christianity, on the other hand, is presented as having a single, universal morality. An ethic like turn the other cheek is meant to apply to everybody, individuals and nations, no matter the situation.
Okay, so to really see how this all fits together, the book uses a really powerful case study. It takes one of the most famous stories in the entire world and flips it on its head.
I mean, we all know the story of the Good Samaritan, right? It seems so straightforward, a beautiful story about being kind to a stranger in need. But this analysis says, hold on, let's look way closer at who these people actually were.
So here's the reinterpretation. First, the players. The Samaritan wasn't just some neutral guy passing by. Samaritans were historical, national enemies of the Jewish people at the time. So what's the moral? Well, the story makes the hero an enemy. It elevates this single act of kindness from an enemy above the bonds of your own people, your own nation. And the consequence of that is huge. It basically says the universal neighbor is more important than your actual brother. It undermines those natural loyalties.
Okay, so why are we talking about a 2,000-year-old debate? What does any of this have to do with today? Well, according to the source, the logic from this ancient conflict is like invisibly running in the background of our modern world.
And this is really the core thesis of the whole book. The argument is that so many of our modern Western values aren't just secular out of nowhere.
They're actually secularized Christian theological concepts. Things like universal pacifism, or elevating the other above your own group, or focusing on abstract ideals to escape worldly problems. The idea is that we've stripped away the theology, but the underlying blueprint, the logic, is still there, shaping our culture.
And once you start looking at our modern arguments through this lens, the source says you can see these echoes everywhere. Think about it. Universalism versus nationalism. Is your highest loyalty to all of humanity or to your own country? Or what about pacifism in politics? Should a nation literally turn the other cheek? And even questions about family and identity. Are universal beliefs more important than your own family or tribal bonds? It's all there.
So that's the core argument from Rabbi Ben Amozek's work. It's this idea that deep beneath our political arguments, there's this ancient theological fault line. And it leaves us with a pretty provocative question to chew on. What happens when a whole society is running on a kind of moral operating system, but it has completely forgotten what that system was originally designed to do?